Hello everybody, welcome to Conscientious Omnivore. My name is Pal. I'm going to be doing another live stream today talking about a whole host of recent news, or somewhat recent news anyway, and giving you my take on them. I'm going to be talking about a lot of different kind of topics, and I'm also going to be talking about Thanksgiving and some related topics. So yeah, hopefully going to have a bunch of people on, and I'll try and keep on top of the comments. Let me know if you have any questions or if you have anything that you want to add or have questions about any of the articles. Hi, Race Lover. You are first. All right, cool, man. So I think we're going to start because it's already 10:15 here on my time, and I got a lot of articles today, so don't really want to lose too much time. I'll just jump right into it. Going to share my screen now here. Cool. All right. So this first article that I want to share with you guys is actually a bit of good news. It's not super recent. It was end of October when I read this article here, but I wanted to share it anyway. It's basically talking about the elephant tourism in Vietnam, as in many places in Asia where they have elephants. They are obviously a tourist attraction, and historically, you know, people have gone on elephant riding tours, and there's been a bunch of kind of like headlines with Kim Kardashian, I don't know, whatever her sisters were when they went and rode on an elephant, and there's been a lot of controversy. But this was actually a bit of good news, because what this article is talking about is that there is a national park in Vietnam that has now done away with those tours where you can actually sit on the elephants and ride them around. And if anybody isn't aware, the reason why vegans are opposed to riding the elephants is that it's incredibly cruel to train them to do that. You basically have to break their spirit. So these animals are literally tortured for months and months on end before they finally kind of capitulate and give in. And they have to do this from when they're little, young elephants. And yeah, it's basically an incredibly cruel practice. And you know, the more we can enlighten people and encourage them to avoid this kind of exploitation, the better. And obviously, we still want people to go to these beautiful areas of the world and enjoy the sight of the elephants. But you can do that in a tour of a national park by walking and just observing the elephants from a distance and seeing them in a more natural environment. Raceler says, should we call fat vegans ethical elephants? I'm not sure what you mean. Should we call fat vegans ethical elephants? I guess maybe because you're saying that because the elephants are vegan because they eat vegetation and they're ethical. I don't know. Elephants don't forget either. I guess that's the other thing they're known for, is having really good memory. So I'm not really sure. But anyway, maybe people should ride ethical elephants in the sense of fat vegans, and then I don't know. Anyway, I don't want to get myself in trouble here. So anyway, so this is a bit of good news, and I just wanted to share that with you guys. And they're basically, giving some funding. Hi, Manu. Nice to see you. They're going to give some funding from different animal trusts and associations to this park so that they can, make sure that the people's livelihoods are, protected, and that they won't be, wanting to basically go back to the old ways of exploiting the elephants and riding them around with people on their backs. So I think this is a great bit of news. Yeah, Raceler, I try to not get in trouble. Manu says, did Chris Kruger delete your whole comment thread below his video, or did you delete it yourself? I'm not sure that was addressed to Race. Sorry, I didn't realize that. Sorry. Okay, next article. This one is actually a little bit of bad news. It's quite sad. The New England Anti-Vivisection Society has released stats on animal testing. And what they found was that the numbers they came up with for the year 2017 showed the highest number of primates ever used so far. And it's an increase in 15%, if I remember right. Yeah, the number of primates used in testing has increased by 15%, while the number of people who oppose animal testing has risen by 13%. They're saying that now 46% of people in America are opposed to testing on animals, and even higher percentages are opposed to testing on non-human primates, so specifically like the monkeys that you often see being used. So I think, you know, this is actually kind of a pretty sad state that you can see over 75,000 primates were used in testing just at the end of 2017, and they're talking about how this organization NEAVS, the Anti-Vivisection Society, they are basically trying to get the National Institute of Health to realize that people are opposed to animal testing, that it's ineffective, that it's cruel, and it's a waste of resources, and trying to show that also the numbers of the animals being used in these experiments is going up, but the productive results of these tests are basically certainly not worth the the ethical kind of implications of the torture that these animals endure in these research facilities. So yeah, I think this is a great effort by them, and shocking figures, really sobering figures to see. Okay, next I want to talk about a brave young lady in Sweden, Greta Thunberg. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right, but she is a student, and she is actually doing some demonstration in front of her local government and parliament. She's basically protesting what she sees as a lack of real determination to combat climate change, and she wants her politicians to basically take it more seriously and adopt a more radical policy where people are really going to make substantial changes, and she wants government to be a part of that. Her family is actually quite involved in trying to do their part for the environment. So this article is pretty interesting. Turns out that the young lady here is on the autism spectrum, and so she kind of feels that it actually allows her to see stuff a lot more kind of, I guess, differently than most normal people, and she can really focus on this effort. So apparently for the past several years now, she has focused on these efforts, and basically trying to get more and more people to be aware, including her classmates and people in the community at large, about what's going on. And here it shows that let's see, yeah, in I guess, yeah, it doesn't say exactly when, but she's been researching this topic for 6 years. She stopped eating meat and buying anything that is not absolutely necessary. In 2015, she stopped flying on airplanes, and a year later, her mother followed suit. They gave up international performing career because I guess her mom is a professional musician, and or I think she's an opera singer, if I remember right. But anyway, the long and short of the story is that they do all the things they can. They basically ride their bikes. They have their own vegetable garden, that they grow in a community plot, all this kind of stuff, and they are petitioning their politicians to do more. She talks about kind of how Sweden is held to be kind of a role model for the world. I guess they do more than other countries, sadly. But what she's saying is that Sweden is not doing enough either, and they themselves aren't even going to meet the, the requirements that that governments know they have to do in order to, not have the global warming exceed the kind of like 1.5 degree centigrade threshold that many scientists are viewing as a critical threshold. So they're basically doing more than maybe some other countries, but she's really just basically saying how they're not doing enough. And I just wanted to applaud her, and I think this is an interesting read for anybody. Definitely check it out, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. But I think, my hat's off to this young lady, and hopefully she brings more awareness to these issues. And I also like the kind of political aspect of it, that she's basically skipping school one day a week to go and do this protest. I guess when she started, she skipped school for like 3 weeks to bring attention to the matter. And her parents were supportive of it, and I thought that was great. And, I really like seeing people getting involved like that in their community and bringing awareness. So I think that's really cool. This one is a very interesting article. We talked in one of the previous sessions that I did. I can't remember if it was the last one. We talked about it may have been the one before, but we talked about the idea that carbon can be sequestered back into the ground using new technologies that are as of yet untested. And this article on Forbes talks about how a little kind of provision was slipped into the recent spending bill by the Republican Congress in the US, and they basically gave a huge tax subsidy, like right off to industry for doing this CO2 capturing. So they talk about here, as a good quote, if you have a big ass power plant in Minnesota or Montana, and your big power plant emits 10 million tons of CO2 a year, you capture that and store it, and you can get paid $500 million a year for 12 years, which is $6 billion. So, this is basically a huge amount of money that companies can get if they go through with this tax credit. And this is a very interesting read. So I think, for anybody who was interested in those previous topics that I covered, especially about the carbon sequestering technology, check out how this might impact, the bottom line, and especially how this is going to be coming from basically taxpayer subsidies. Just very interesting stuff. And, I don't trust my politicians farther than I can throw them. So I think there will be some shady stuff going on here for sure. Yeah, Race, I'm not sold on it either. I think it sounds like a gimmick, quite frankly. So I think it'll be some way that it will allow big, huge polluting companies to kind of keep doing what they're doing, and then get paid to somehow, with an as of yet untested technology, basically try to sequester the mess that they've made. And I just don't really see how that's going to happen. I haven't really understood what I've read so far on how that technology is even supposed to work. So I'm not at all convinced either. This next article is actually talking about a recent study that showed that vegan crops produce 1,900% more protein than animals. So thanks, Race. He says I should run for president. Thanks a lot. I actually can't run for president in the U.S. Because I'm a naturalized citizen, so I wasn't born there, and therefore I could never become president. Of the Race Lover fan club. Well, yes, of course, I would love to be president of that association. So, yeah, basically they're talking about a study that showed that you could get an almost 20-fold increase in the amount of food that you produce by switching to a vegan food system. And they are talking about, like in the US alone, it means that you could feed an additional 350 million people. So that's more people than live in all of the US as of right now. And you could do that by replacing all the animal all the animal foods that people are producing, and just growing the food that you're using to feed those animals directly for people. Hi, Leon. So, yeah, it's just very interesting. Great article, great stats, and encourage people to check this out. But, they're basically talking about how you could reduce global land use by 75% if everyone stopped eating beef and went vegan. Pretty crazy stats. And then they talk about, again, alfalfa, oats, grain, and corn. The vast majority of that is used to feed factory farmed animals. And if you just instead grew, food for people, you could just have huge savings. So pretty good article. Check that out. Next one. This one I thought was interesting for our Canadian friends, it looks like the Canadian government is going to be investing $150 million in vegan protein development. It's part of a much larger government spending program. I guess they have something like $1 billion or something. I forget exactly how much, but it's some huge amount of money. Oh yeah, here it is, $950 million that are going to be funneled into innovative businesses in Canada. And it's meant to accelerate economic growth and blah, blah, blah. But of that, $150 million is going to be going to plant-based protein companies. It's going to be a kind of consortium of companies doing this. And, you know, this is basically, they're thinking that there's a huge boom in the vegan protein market, and they want to get in on that. And, yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I would much rather see, you know, tax subsidies going to things like this than going to other things like the, you know, animal and agriculture industry. So I think this is good news. Next, wanted to share this little bit of good news. Commercial fishing was banned in the Arctic for 16 years in a few specific, I guess, like fragile ecosystem areas. And the EU has signed the pledge, as well as some other countries, 9 other countries, I guess. And this is a big deal. It's going to hopefully preserve a lot of these areas that are deemed particularly, you know, vulnerable to like species collapse and all this kind of stuff. So I thought this was a great bit of news. For all the bad kind of news that I've been sharing with you guys on the ocean front and aquatic life. Now this one is coming from the U.S. and a plan has been approved now in, I think this is Washington if I remember right. Where is this? Oh, Oregon, sorry. So in Oregon, they're going to basically now kill a bunch of these seals, which are basically eating up a bunch of the salmon that are coming out, you know, in their area. And they're saying that, you know, these sea lions, sorry, I think I said seals before, but these sea lions are eating basically too many of some of these vulnerable fish, and they're saying that, yeah, it says here, there was an almost 90% probability that one of the upper Willamette steelheads would go extinct. So they're basically going to approve a plan to kill a bunch of these sea lions and remove them by lethal force from this area, so that it reduces the pressure on the fishing, you know, life there, the fish that use those waters for breeding. And you know, I think I'm with the Humane Society here. Killing more sea lions fixes nothing and is a draconian solution. If you think about, you know, ecosystems and you look at things like this with predation and, you know, sea lions and you know, orcas and all these other things that eat fish, the reason why people want to kill them is because they're competing for the food source. You know, people are viewing these fish as food source, and they don't want the sea lions or orcas or other kind of predators to eat them. So I just think this is an incredibly short-sighted thing, and it's kind of the classic, you know, what do you do, like when people go and run amok with their kind of like planning? It's like they create imbalance, and then they try to fix it by creating more imbalance. It's like it just never seems to really work out well in the end, and I don't think this will work out well in the long run either. So I just think this is kind of a sad story. I wanted to share a little bit of good news here, so I'm trying to alternate things. There's probably a pattern that you guys have noticed, but I've given a shout out before to a YouTube channel here called Real Family Journey. You can see the people here, this family in the picture here. The Metro did a great little write-up on them, talking specifically about their efforts for unschooling their children. So anybody who's watching, you know, with kids, I myself am actually currently investigating kind of different schooling options for our son. He's going to probably be starting school in the next year, in the fall. And you know, one of the options I definitely want to consider is kind of an unschooling approach, homeschooling, whatever you want to call it, study group kind of thing. And this family is doing just that, and they have a YouTube channel. They talk about vegan topics as well as the unschooling, and this article is a great read. So shout out to Real Family Journey, and kudos to them for putting their kids first and doing what I think is a great job of providing a great quality education for their children themselves, and not relying on the kind of school mandated you know, kind of curriculums. So shout out to them. Check out their channel and subscribe. Let them know I sent you. Say hi. No, I actually have 2 kids, Ray Slever. We have 2 kids, but my daughter's younger, so she's not in school yet. Next up, this isn't all that recent news. There has been quite a few channels that have talked about this, so I kind of don't want to, you know, belabor the point. Most people watching probably know that there was a big kind of brouhaha from a snarky / I don't know, sarcastic reply from this food editor, Sitwell. What's his face? William Sitwell. And he basically got in trouble and actually lost his job, or I guess he quit technically before they fired him, because I guess another journalist had written him an email basically proposing a television series on plant-based recipes, and then he replied basically, you know, he claimed jokingly by saying like, oh, how about we do a series on killing vegans? And then, you know, how to trap them, how to interrogate them, forcing them to eat meat, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, you know, the magazine that he was the editor for, they said it's too far, and, you know, they basically kind of gave him the boot, but he quit before they fired him. And then a lot of people kind of came in to, you know, support him or to bash him. And, you know, it's no surprise probably to anybody watching that Piers Morgan would you know, be defending him and basically giving a hard time to the person who, you know, had that email exchange with him and other people. So he basically said people are just too, you know, thin-skinned and they should get over it, and it's just a bad joke. And then he went on to, of course, say that the people who are upset are just, you know, upset because they're hangry, which is hungry, angry, and they should just eat some meat and then all would be right with the world. Obviously, I don't really think he's a, you know, sane individual, as we've seen from the way he, you know, talks to basically any vegan that has ever come on his show, as far as I can see. But yeah, so not a huge fan of him. And then I wanted to share this kind of story, which was a opinion piece written by a lady called Rose Prince, where she is basically saying that, you know, she supports this guy Sitwell, and she thinks that you know, what he did was like in poor taste and it's a bad joke, but you know, like whatever, like get over it. And she thinks that vegans are too extreme and that they're too thin-skinned and they should just basically get over themselves. It's pretty ridiculous that somebody would go this far to support somebody who, you know, clearly went over the line. And in today's day and age, with social media being the way it is, I mean, if you did this with any other group, I would expect that the person would lose their job. You know, if it was a editor of any kind of other magazine, let's say it was a travel magazine, and somebody sent them an email pitching them an idea for, hey, come to Budapest and I'll show you the you know, Holocaust memorial at the synagogue. It's the world's second largest synagogue. And then he replied back and said, oh, how about I show you some death camp stuff instead? You know, if somebody did that, they would get fired and you would be happy about it. So how can this lady, you know, like pretend that what he did wasn't, you know, really serious? And it's just, it's ridiculous. I just don't understand how people don't see that joking around about killing somebody for any kind of, like, you know, conviction they may have, especially when it's like a conviction of, you know, compassion and nonviolence. Like, it's just beyond me. I really don't understand how these people think that, you know, that this is okay. It's just really crazy. Leon says he's also anti-hunting. Yeah, I remember they did have the thing about the trophy hunting. So it is real strong cognitive dissonance there. Ray says, call him Piers Morgan. yeah. So yeah, I think he's just incredibly, stuck in cognitive dissonance. He doesn't understand kind of like that it's illogical. His position is inconsistent. Next up, more on this matter. This was actually an article that I believe Generally recommended to me. So shout out to Generally. She's one of the regular viewers. I think she sent me this on Twitter, if I remember right. But anyway, one of these was sent by her. This was an opinion piece where I think they really, kind of summed up my view on this very well. They basically just said kind of similar lines of what I just said, that people shouldn't be thinking that it's okay to be joking around about these kinds of things, and that if this was done for any other kind of group, whether it be a religious group or a ethnic group or any kind of other thing, like somebody with a particular sexual preference, there would be a brouhaha over it, and it would be justified. And I just don't know why people think that it's okay to continue doing this with vegans. Let's see. Ray Slower says, in more news, Goji Man evidently just released his first case study, according to the title of his vid in my notifications. Cool. Yeah, shout out to Goji Man too. I guess if anybody's not familiar with him, he's pretty much kind of on fire lately in the vegan community. I think he's doing really great work, and I enjoy most of his videos that I've seen. Yeah. So anyway, check out this article. I think it's a pretty good one. Written by Ian Middleton. This next one I kind of want to touch on briefly. There was a proposition number 2 that was up for vote in California. We talked about this in the last Vegan Views live stream, and basically it successfully passed. But we discussed how, I guess, PETA and a few other kind of animal rights organizations or animal welfare organizations were kind of maybe opposed to it because they thought it didn't go far enough, and that they thought it would send a bad message to the public. I've read through PETA's statement on why they opposed the Proposition 2 initiative, and I think it kind of goes back to what we discussed last time. I can definitely see the idea behind the abolitionist approach, and I also am an abolitionist when it comes to the animal exploitation. I want it to just stop altogether. I don't think it's enough to just have enough space or humane or whatever. I mean, there is no way to humanely end the life of the animal that doesn't want to die. So I think that is the only real long-term solution. But in the meantime, anything that can be done to reduce their suffering, I think should be done, and it should be applauded. And then animal rights activists should take that as the next step for the next conversation that needs to be had with people, and to really kind of continue that progress. So, I guess that's my view on it. But if anybody was interested, I would definitely recommend, checking out this link and read what they say. And I think if nothing else, it's just good to have kind of respectful dialogue. We are all on the same side. I think that's the message I would stress to anybody who's advocating on either side of these kind of messages, that we should not be infighting on this. We should be kind of, supporting each other and trying to see each other's point of view. So that's kind of what I would say. This next article I thought was very interesting, and it kind of follows along to the the previous topic with PETA or other animal rights groups, when we get into this kind of idea of my advocacy is better than your advocacy type of argument. I don't like that kind of I just don't like that kind of infighting. I want people to be kind of at least working towards a common goal and working together. And my view has always been, from when I first became vegan, that the different approaches are necessary because different people are different. and they respond differently to these kind of methods. So, you know, in my view, some people respond really well to kind of the angry vegan gains style message delivery, and some people really like the, you know, more mellow kind of like happy, healthy vegan approach, or, you know, something like the Emily, you know, bite-sized vegan type approach, or whatever, you know, maybe the health aspect, you know, the Dr. Greger style approach, whatever. And I think there's plenty of room for all the different kinds of, you know, advocacy. Let's see. Race Lover says, more news. Earlier today, a source from ABC News said Savage lost a fight to Frank Tufano's left eyebrow after an altercation over roadkill. Yes, probably. Leon's asking, most cost-effective. Well, you know, I think this is a kind of good, you know, it's like this article, I think, is kind of like asking some good questions, but I think they are kind of getting it wrong. And your puzzled little, you know, emoji is pretty much the way I feel about this article. They spend an awful lot of time about talking about what's effective, and they're just looking at the kind of studies that have been done, and they acknowledge that they are limited. They also acknowledge that they're problematic, and that it's hard to gauge what kind of activism has actually worked to get people to become vegan. And you know, they are just trying to kind of like look at it as like a numbers game of like, okay, we spend this amount on flyering, or this amount on doing, you know, Cube of Truth style activism, and then, you know, how many people do you turn vegan from that? And I think just because there aren't really, you know, good ways to quantify those things and measure those, you know, easily, that doesn't mean they're not effective. And if you look at the number of people who are going vegan in the past, even just year, it is a steadily rising, you know, figure, and the movement is definitely gaining momentum. There's more and more people going vegan, and they're basically trying to say, like, you know, based on, you know, as far as I can read all the stuff that they said, the analysis is pretty incomplete, and they're trying to draw some conclusions around it, and they're basically making the claim that, like, yeah, it's not very effective to flyer, it's not very effective to protest, it's not very effective to tell people about stuff, it's not effective to do anything. You know, the only thing that's effective is like putting like economic pressure on companies to basically, you know, treat the animals better and give, you know, the cage-free hens and all this kind of stuff. And I very strongly disagree with the kind of conclusion of this article. Hi, Essay. So, yeah, I mean, I really don't, you know, I didn't really like this article. I've read a number of different articles on Vox.com about kind of animal issues, and usually I think they do a great job of writing on the matter, but I think this one, they really missed the mark, in my opinion. I just think, you know, those kind of advocacy groups that are doing all this work, I think, are doing wonderful work. And there are just countless examples where you read about people saying that the Cube of Truth style activism, or, you know, some kind of in-person, you know, flyering or leafleting helped them make the transition to going to a vegan lifestyle, or if nothing else, just got them thinking about it, or, you know, got them doing those first couple steps, and then they went online and they saw some videos or whatever. So I honestly think that those are still great efforts, and that we should keep doing them. So, but if nothing else, I think, you know, this was an interesting article, and I would definitely recommend people check it out and give it a read. Okay, so this next one, I don't want to scroll down because the pictures are actually quite graphic, but this comes from Canada as well, and there was a community that got really upset because some of the animal entrails, like guts and, you know, carcass parts that aren't fit for human consumption, got splattered and, you know, dropped out on a, you know, neighborhood street when the truck that was driving, you know, through that neighborhood had to come to an abrupt stop, and a bunch of these said animal parts, you know, sloshed out of the truck and onto the street. And then it took days before the company came back and cleaned it all up, and people were just like so incredibly upset about it. And you know, it's just like more of this kind of like cognitive dissonance. It's like people just don't want to see it. it's like the problem is that it got slashed out on the road, not that there is a truck full of, you know, dead animal parts and carcass remains that are disgusting and unsanitary and completely just, you know, not something you want to see. But like, these same people are probably going to go to the store and just, you know, buy bacon and ham and whatever else from these poor animals that got slaughtered. So it's just crazy. And, you know, the people in the community are rightfully upset. And the company spokesman is basically just like, well, you know, we have like so many trucks on the road, and just because there's one of these incidents, you know, doesn't mean anything, and everything's fine, and, you know, get back to your normal day. That's kind of their response to it. So it's just kind of a crazy article. I'll have the links for these as normal in the description afterwards. So if anybody wants to, you know, check these out or see them in more detail, you know, you'll be able to do that. Yeah, Ray says they don't care if they don't see it. Yeah, absolutely. It's like out of sight, out of mind. The problem is that, you know, it got slashed on their road, not that it's in the truck to begin with. We're going to talk about hunting a bunch. You know, as you guys have probably remembered from my previous videos, we talked about it before. You know, last time I talked about the poor young man who got killed by the hunter. There's a couple of articles here that I want to share on the matter. This one is about a national park in the UK. It is touted as a conservation park, but yet there are, I guess, opportunities for foreign hunters even, and I think probably local hunters too. I mean, they're kind of making a big stink about people from, you know, internationally coming and traveling to this conservation park and getting to shoot like rare breeds of animals that are found almost, I guess, exclusively in this park, and they're paying up to £9,000 to shoot a, you know, particular breed of animal. They have different prices for the different animals. It's on a huge park. It's owned by the Duke of Bedford, whoever that is, and you know, they're of course saying that it's a natural part of the, you know, doing this call every year. And Race, I don't know how to do the picture-in-picture. I'll try to learn how to do that. I might need to use some kind of streaming software like OBS Studio, and I haven't learned how to do that. Maybe I'll try that. Yeah. Anyway, that's like a technical thing for me to solve. I'll look that up. I think that would be cool. Okay, so yeah, basically, you know, there is a campaign group who are criticizing this effort, and they're basically saying it's just, you know, an annoying thing that you know, it's clearly just meant to raise money, and you know, these people are advertising in different countries like Belgium and Denmark and other places that you know, it's like, you don't even need any experience, just come and we'll let you, you know, go and shoot this rare, beautiful, you know, whatever type of deer, or this you know, rare, you know, whatever it is. I don't know what other kind of animals they have, but just kind of crazy. And let's see. Leanne says, I don't mind them shooting dead animals. I may have misspoke there. I'm certain that they are shooting the animals dead is probably what I meant to say. So yeah, it's just terrible. And just really goes to show you, like, you know, it's the same thing of just, it's not just trophy hunting happening in Africa or Asia or, you know, wherever. It's, yeah, it's basically like, you know, in the UK as well, directly. This is a crazy story that that I saw. I was actually quite shocked to see this. There is a animal rights activist who basically was attending a vigil, I think like Animal Save, and when he got back to his car, he found a threat and a foxtail, a dismembered foxtail, in a bloodied envelope, with this note that said, every time you abuse a hunter on social media, another fox will die. And it is just sickening that, you know, somebody could do something like this. They reported it to the police, obviously, and unfortunately they couldn't find any DNA or anything on the envelope or the paper. I guess all the blood that was on there was just from the fox. And it's just crazy. And yeah, it's just sad that, you know, somebody would go through this and think that it's funny. They put a little smiley face on the note. And it's just incredibly sad that this person is being threatened. You know, I'm sure, like, it's meant to intimidate the person as well. Like, clearly the person who would do something like this is going to be killing animals regardless, but this is, like, seriously, like, psychopathic territory. Like, I would definitely try to, you know, do something about this if I were the police, because somebody who could basically threaten somebody like this, you know, they're going to be dangerous. They could, you know, do something like harming people directly. I could easily imagine that somebody that could do something like this. Kudos to the activist who is saying that you know, they're not going to let it intimidate them and whatever. But I mean, he's got a daughter, he's got a wife. You know, I just think it's a really scary kind of situation to be in, and I don't think that you know, I would want this to happen to me or my family. I would be certainly pretty upset to get somebody, you know, leaving stuff like scary stuff like this on my car. Yeah, Ray says they do it all the time online and try to stop and intimidate people. Absolutely. I think very much from what I've seen, vegan activists definitely get a huge share of the, you know, threats, you know, made against them, and not the other way around, like the farmers and the hunters, which they're always claiming, the farmers, that they're getting, you know, death threats and whatever. But I see a lot more evidence for it the other way around. This was a kind of weird story. The lady here pictured with her husband, she actually just died. She, I guess, fell from some kind of horse riding accident. She was actually set to be prosecuted in the coming weeks. She was filmed beating a hunt saboteur with her riding crop, as you can see in the picture still from the video. And she was going to be, I guess, prosecuted for that because they had the video proof of her pushing people with her horse, hitting this guy repeatedly, multiple times with the riding crop. He needed some light medical treatment for that. And yeah, I guess, yeah, she hit him 17 times around the head. And basically, she just died. She fell from her horse on Wednesday after a drag hunt. So she was out hunting with her horse, and she died from the fall, I guess. So it's just crazy. And then they go and talk about, I guess, her husband. He was a very rich man. He's like the heir to some huge hotel chain that I guess is like one of the most famous hotels in the UK. It's one of the oldest, and blah, blah, blah. These people basically spent a lot of their life traveling around and riding horses and going to hunts and killing animals. And now she fell off her horse and died. And of course, the article is just basically saying, like, oh, these, you know, mean, nasty vegans are basically gloating over her death, and, you know, how can they do this, and it's so bad and whatever. And it's like, look, I'm not going to gloat over her death. You know, I don't want to see anybody dying and what have you. But to think that, you know, somebody who's literally beating another human being, you know, and trying to basically like run them over with her horse, should get a whole lot of sympathy, or just because she fell from doing more of what she was doing illegally already, which is what the hunt saboteurs were trying to stop her from doing. It's like, I think this, you know, kind of approach is all wrong. So that's just my 2 cents. Leanne says karma's a bitch. Yeah, a lot of people said that. And I think just for pointing that out, you know, they're calling out the vegans, saying like, oh, you know, how could you not have sympathy for her? And it's like, well, I do have sympathy for her. I feel bad for anybody that dies. But, you know, again, like, it's just another reason why people shouldn't be riding horses. They shouldn't be doing these crazy hunts. People get shot all the time. People, you know, have these horrific accidents. And this is just another one of those. Hi, Kay. Hi, Fono. Fono says, imagine a truck crashed and remains of vegetables were splattered everywhere. Yeah. It's like, you wouldn't really be reading that because it wouldn't be a story worth mentioning. Sorry, guys. Let me just get a swig of water. Leon says, read a recent story of a hunter killing his wife in an accident. Yeah, I mean, last week or last time I did this, we talked about the guy in France who killed killed a young man while he was out biking. This kind of stuff happened all the time. I actually knew somebody back in Connecticut who shot somebody as well while they were out hunting. And I don't think that guy died, actually, but I don't even remember. But I just remember it was like a big thing. I didn't know the person well. It was like more like an acquaintance through a family friend. But crazy stuff. Yeah, it's not safe. Okay, and this is a kind of interesting reaction to this kind of news. So basically, there is this guy who is working at the BBC, Chris Packham, and he has been outspoken about, banning hunting, and he's opposed to the hunt, and he doesn't want to see the, trophy hunting, and he doesn't want to see animals being hunted at all. And I guess like some of the people who obviously are in support of this have been basically encouraging the BBC to sack this guy and fire him from his job because he's using his position at the BBC to basically politicize and share his own personal view, and using his platform at the BBC to do politically not neutral remarks is what they're basically saying. And Leanne says Dick Cheney shot his friend while hunting. Also, that's right. And that guy didn't die, but I'm sure he could have easily died if maybe the bullet had just, or the pellets had gone a little bit closer to him. That's right. He didn't die, Leanne. And the end of this article is interesting because they put in an opinion piece by Sir Ian Bottom, whoever this guy is, one of the kind of, I guess, elite people who are also going out and doing these hunts. A lot of these people, they just have kind of too much time and money on their hands, apparently, and they've got nothing better to do than go and kill innocent animals and then try and justify it. And this reply from the guy he pulls out all the stops, how they're saying that without the hunting, there would be no conservation, and all of the wonderful biodiversity that's there on these, hunting grounds, and that there's all these wild birds and game and all this kind of stuff, and that it wouldn't be there if people weren't paying for this type of conservation and blah, blah, blah. Whole bunch of logical errors, but, they're just going through the whole shenanigans, trying to justify the continuation of what they're doing. So I just think this was an interesting read as well, if anybody wants to see it and kind of see the kind of two-sidedness of it. And, yeah. Hi, Meat is Murder. Shout out to Meat is Murder. Everybody sign up. Ray says, I will find an anti-vegan and leave them a note and slaughtered zucchini in a bag saying if they don't knock it off, I have a basket full more at home. Yeah. Careful, though, because I'm sure that would be taken seriously by the police. It's more the threat. Okay, so now we are going to get to a whole bunch of stuff about Thanksgiving, because Thanksgiving is coming up this week. So for the people watching in the U.S., Thanksgiving is a huge holiday for a lot of people. And last year, I actually did a video encouraging people to do a vegan Thanksgiving. I hope if anybody hasn't seen that, maybe I'll link that at the end as well, and people can check that out. I would definitely encourage people with the same message now. There's never been a better and easier time to do a vegan Thanksgiving than now, and here's some good reasons why. This article talks about a Salmonella outbreak that has resulted in a huge recall of raw turkey meat, and this has actually killed someone now, and many people have gotten sick. I don't remember, I think they tell you in the story here, but anyway, they recalled over 91,000 pounds of the raw meat. And yeah, 74 cases have been reported so far and 1 death. So, it's very serious. Despite what these raw meat eating carnivore dieter people will tell you, Salmonella is real, and it is a very serious thing. And especially for people who are frail or elderly or young, or if you're sick with something else, it can very easily result in death. And so you can see here, you know, oh, okay, sorry, 164 people have gotten sick. Sorry. And also 63 people have been hospitalized. So even if you're not dying, you know, you could do a stent in the hospital. So I mean, if nothing else, that would suck. And they're basically telling people like, oh, you know, make sure that you're cooking all your, you know, turkey and your turkey patties, and you know, then you'll be safe, and just thoroughly cook it and whatever. And this was an interesting stat here at the end of the article. They said that there is an estimated 1.2 million salmonella cases in the United States annually, and you know, various foods are to blame for 1 million of those illnesses. They of course don't tell you what they are, but we all know that for most of these things, they are animal products, and meat specifically. This one is a kind of article where they talk about various consumer advocacy groups being mad at the USDA for not releasing brand names in this said turkey salmonella outbreak. And of course, the you know, Department of Agriculture is going to defend themselves, and they're saying that of course they're doing everything they can to track it all down, and that as soon as they have all the information, they'll release it and what have you. But knowing how, you know, industry and government regulation goes hand in hand, I would say they probably won't release this until after Thanksgiving, because if they did, there would probably be a whole lot less people buying the said turkey products, and I don't think they want that. So even with the recall, you know, they probably don't want to expand it, and they probably don't want an even bigger scare where people will, you know, not buy the turkey meat and kind of ruin their Thanksgiving. And the thing that I found the most interesting when I was reading these articles, because I got these all from MSN, was that right next to these two articles that I was reading, there was this article. How do you figure out how much turkey to buy for your Thanksgiving dinner? The answer, of course, should be 0. But instead, they're basically telling you that you should buy 1.5 pounds of turkey per person. That is a ridiculously huge amount of meat. And they're basically saying like, oh, it's going to give everybody a generous serving, and then you're going to have leftovers. And the reality is that nobody should be eating animals to begin with, but especially not this much. And especially if you have ever, you know, had kind of the typical American Thanksgiving Day feast, you'll know that you pretty much end up being sick for the rest of the day and not being able to move and not being able to do anything. So I would certainly encourage people, please, please, please leave the turkeys alone, and, you know, go out for a 5K run instead in the morning and go eat some healthy vegan foods after. Let's see the comments here. Leon says, I handled raw vegan chicken a lot of times. Weirdly, I got no salmonella. And here is another great article. This is a opinion piece telling people that they are kidding themselves if they think they are buying humane meat or eggs. If you remember back in 2015, DXE, Direct Action Everywhere, they got into a whole mess of trouble when they exposed a Whole Foods turkey supplier with the highest Whole Foods humane rating possible as being a completely fraudulent operation. They had a dog and pony type show where they had one little tiny farm set up with the completely idyllic kind of, you know, the turkeys are walking around and in green pasture and everything's happy and honky-dory. And then what they realized was when you looked at how many animals were on that farm, it was just some tiny, you know, number of animals, and no way would there be enough to supply Whole Foods nationally. And so then DXE did some digging, and they found the main, you know, farm that was supplying that company, and they were, you know, keeping the birds in deplorable conditions, you know, horrible, absolutely typical factory farmed, you know, diseased birds, you know, the whole works. And they released video of that, and there was a big thing. They're actually trying to sue Whole Foods now, and there's a effort that they're looking for people who are consumers who may have purchased one of those birds back at that time, and they want to get kind of a class action lawsuit if possible and get more people in on that. So if you guys maybe were eating animal products then back in 2015 and may have bought one of these birds from Whole Foods, definitely look into that effort by DXE. So I think this opinion article was great. I don't know this person, JC Reese, but you know, they basically, you know, talk about their own experience about how they wanted to, you know, get more humane eggs and all this kind of stuff, and they went to their farmers market, and then they went out and visited one of these said small farmers who were selling their eggs at the farmers market, and what they found was that the, you know, basically it's a lie that like the cage-free you know, illusion is really a delusion. You are really just end up paying more money for birds that are kept in conditions like this. So instead of them being in tiny little cages, you cram the same amount of birds and you just now keep them on the floor, and they peck each other just as bad, if not worse, and they're just as sick and just as diseased. And they have some really great stats in this article, so I would definitely recommend this to anybody who you know, gets you know, kind of the I only buy humane meat kind of argument. You can feel free to send them this article. I think this does a really great job without being preachy and without being kind of like too hard on people, but I think it really kind of exposes the truth, and I think it does a good job of it. So check out this article. Next, Kevin Smith, you guys might remember, suffered a severe heart attack that almost killed him. And the, what do you call it? His daughter, I guess, has been vegan for a number of years, and he has now adopted a vegan diet. He's lost a bunch of weight. He's feeling a lot healthier. He was able to reduce his some of his cholesterol meds and heart meds, and he did a like, I guess, an ad or a TV spot, or I don't know what this was. I think it was an ad. Yeah, it was a video where they are basically saying, like, yeah, leave the turkeys off your plate, man, for Thanksgiving. Go to a sanctuary and you know, adopt turkeys. And he basically says, yeah, right here, they are such kind, beautiful creatures. Oh, I'm sorry, that's his daughter saying that, Harley. They're very friendly, and I don't think that enough people recognize their value and importance to the world. And then, oh yeah, this is what Kevin said. And you can pet them. Who knew you can pet a turkey? Just like when you pet a dog or a cat, man, there's really something, there's something really soothing about it. So it's great that he's kind of making this ethical connection. I know at the beginning, after he had suffered his heart attack and after he had started eating a vegan diet, I think he really was just kind of doing it from a selfish, like, hey, it's going to keep me alive kind of thing, standpoint. And now I think he's, you know, clearly making a connection with some of these animals. I think that's wonderful news. Hopefully he becomes a vocal advocate for, you know, ethical veganism. I think it'd be great. So good bit of news there. Kay says it's okay if they're magic eggs from Betty's farm. I don't know if that's kind of an in-joke or just something I missed. But yeah, magic eggs from the magical farm where the animals are always happy and none of them ever die. Okay, this is a wonderful bit of news. There was recently this fried chicken contest, and a vegan dish won the contest. So I just thought this was so awesome. I guess they did like waffles and fried chicken, but it was vegan. And I guess this is a national fried chicken festival in New Orleans. And Atlas Monroe was the first and only vegan vendor at the two-day festival. And there was this judge, somebody Grimm. Yeah, Ryan Grimm. He's the editor of Extra Crispy, and he was the judge. And he voted this the best fried chicken. He said it was the most enjoyable fried chicken he had eaten. He said the thigh and drumstick were super crunchy and super tender. Even after sitting for a while, the skin was thick, nubby, and crunchier than any fried chicken skin I'd ever encountered. And it wasn't even chicken, it was vegan. So this is awesome. I mean, I just think I love when I read this kind of stuff, like with the pizza, that, you know, the best pizza is vegan pizza, the best burger is a vegan burger, the best chicken is a vegan chicken. It's like, man, this is just awesome. So I'm thrilled to see this kind of stuff. And if anybody says they can't do, Thanksgiving without killing a poor turkey and eating that, show them this and then make them do a vegan turkey. I'm sure they won't regret it. Along the lines of kind of recipes, I found this one. I just wanted to share it with you guys. I have not made it yet, but if I do, I'll probably do a video on it. Just looking at the pictures and reading the ingredients, it just seemed like such an awesome thing, and I think it would go over really well at a holiday kind of celebration where people are doing a lot of food, or buffet style eating or whatever. This one is a curry sweet potato dip. So it's basically got beans and sweet potatoes and seasoned with curry and spices and chilies, and it sounds awesome. It's gluten-free, oil-free, blah blah blah. Good for you, and check it out. Seems really simple, and probably got a lot of great tasting spices and stuff too, so check this out. Next, this is a flourless sweet potato brownie, and I actually have made this today, and I made a video about it, and I'll post that hopefully maybe tomorrow or sometime very soon. But this would be a wonderful dessert for Thanksgiving or any other time really, and it's ridiculously easy and super good. Came out pretty much just as expected, and I can definitely vouch for this recipe. Super easy. Check it out if you guys want. And also, if anybody's looking for a sweet potato pie or a butternut squash pie, that would go really well as sort of like a pumpkin pie replacement, a vegan option. I have recipes on my channel that you can use for said pie, and that would go well with a Thanksgiving style feast as well. So check that out. Okay, moving on. There's still a lot more to go, guys. So the Dairy is Dead title here. They are talking about the world's largest dairy company for the first time ever reported a loss year on year. They lost $130 million from 2017 to 2018. They had never experienced a loss in 17-year existence of the company, and they're saying how it's not the only one. They're talking about Dean Foods, which I covered already in a previous episode. They closed a huge facility that they had in Illinois. They are reducing their holdings in some traditional, milk, dairy milk companies. They're not renewing contracts with certain farms, and they're increasing their investment in plant-based alternatives, and specifically this vegan flax-based milk company called Good Karma Foods. And this article talks about this New Zealand-based company and how they misled investors and farmers, and they basically said they were doing better than they actually did, and they lost all this money. And I just think this is kind of great news. It's further pressure on these companies to change, and the world is changing, and it's forcing their hand. People are really starting to know about how cruel dairy production is, and they want no part of it, and I think that's wonderful. This next story is directly in line with that. There is a animal rights advocacy group in Denmark who wanted to basically pay close to 6,000 pounds, which was, I guess, 50,000 krona, or what was it? I don't know what the local money is called, but anyway, about 6,000 pounds. So whatever that is, I don't know, maybe $8,000 or something like that, to any dairy farmer of this particular company, which is the largest dairy in Denmark. And they wanted to film just a typical day on the dairy farm. And, quite not surprisingly, none of the farms want to allow that to happen, because they know that what they will be able to show is little baby calves getting separated from their parents, male calves getting bolt gunned in the head at 1 day old. There was quite a few interesting points in this article. One point here was that they said it showed that less than half of the Danish public, excuse me, knew that cows must give birth to produce milk. And only about a third knew that calves are removed just a few hours after birth. The second part, I think, is not that shocking, but just that, less than half know that cows actually have to give birth to produce milk. That part is actually quite surprising. So I think, that is definitely a sign that advocacy groups really need to keep doing more to spread awareness and make people aware of this, because it is not something that a lot of people understand or are aware of, and they think that there is no cruelty in dairy, or that somehow these cows can just produce milk kind of indefinitely, and that is certainly not the case, and that's not how it's done. And also, another part that was very interesting here is that they say that about 9 in 10 Danish farmers work for Arla Foods. This is that company that they were trying to get to allow them to do the filming. And they are the UK's biggest dairy farm. They own Lurepack and Anchor brands. So I definitely have seen these here in Hungary as well. I know that it gets exported here. I think I've seen like Lurepack butter and a few other products in the supermarkets here in Hungary. So they definitely export to other countries as well. But it looks like they get a lot of their dairy from these farms in Denmark. But yeah, they don't want transparency. This one was an interesting Huffington Post article. There is a company, Recombinetics. They are basically working with technology where they can edit genes for farm animals, and they are literally like, I don't know what you call this, but like custom designing like farm animals by changing their genetic code. And here you can see right here, cows that can withstand hotter temperatures, cows born without pesky horns, and pigs that never reach puberty. So they talk about how they're modifying these genetic traits in a lab and then producing these animals that you don't have to dehorn. And apparently this is some, kind of thing that's supposed to alleviate people's concern, like, oh, it's not as cruel. You don't have to like dehorn the animal. You don't have to castrate the pig. I just can't believe that like somebody would want, as a meat eater, when I was a meat eater, like I wouldn't want to eat this animal. I don't want to eat a genetically modified animal. I don't really understand how they think that there is going to be a market for this. Like, it's just kind of crazy in my mind. And I think the most telling quote here is right here, kind of by the CEO of the company, Tammy Lee. So it says here, but first it needs to convince regulators that gene-edited animals are no different than conventionally bred ones. To make the technology appealing and to ease any fears that it may be creating Franken animals, Recombinetics isn't starting with productivity. So they're talking about like editing the genes for productivity. Instead, it's going to introduce gene-edited traits as a way to ease animal suffering. So it's like, oh, no, we're not going to try to get permission for us to do this kind of stuff and play God with animals and do all this crazy stuff by saying that, it'll allow us to have more production than we already have. No, we're doing it for the animals. They'll suffer less. And it's like, yeah, this goes, hand in hand with like when, companies wanted to make animals that are basically brain dead and that they would somehow be kind of fed intravenously and then you could just eat their meat and there's no cruelty because they can't feel anything and they're brain dead. Kay says, before I went vegan 3 years ago, I honestly believed we were doing cows a favor by taking their milk. Yeah, a lot of people think that, you have to milk them because it's painful for them, just like for a mom, like if the baby hasn't nursed in a while, like in a human mom. And that's true to some extent, but what people don't realize is that, they're often fed these hormones and things like that produce larger udders than normal, and also because we're taking away the babies, there is no way for them to kind of get rid of that pressure, the pressure. So that's why they're kind of quote unquote happy to go and get milked, because it does alleviate that pressure in their udders. Leon says you don't have to castrate a soybean or lab meat either. Yeah, exactly. Right on. So here is another story where I think it really talks to people's kind of knowledge about animals. Like I had previously even gotten into an argument with family members about like wool. A lot of people don't realize how cruel the wool industry is, because at face value, it's kind of like what I think most people think of the dairy industry too. Like if you don't know what's happening is like, oh, you're just taking some milk. Like, what's the big deal? And it's like, well, we're just, shearing the sheep. Like, what's the big deal? It's like getting a haircut. And it's like, well, yeah, it's like getting a haircut if your barber, or hairdresser, like beat you with a baseball bat, threw you on the ground, stomped on you, spit at you, and called you all sorts of names, and then violently sheared you until you were bloody. Like, that's what it's really like. And there has been a bunch of great video exposure showing this cruelty recently. And this article has the video, or at least part of the video, I think. And they also talk about, which farms were implicated and where, and how they are trying to press for, some kind of like legal action against these farms, or whatever you want to call these like shearing operations. And they also want closed circuit TVs installed to basically allow people to to monitor the abuse that these animals are going through, and they're trying to mandate that. So I think it's a good effort. Again, it's not a abolitionist approach. Like, being able to see them on the CCTV doesn't solve the cruelty, but at least if you bring light to it, more people will see it, more people will demand that an end to it, and then more people will avoid buying wool. So I just think it's it's an important effort. The ugly truth of Uggs is a good one. Do they use wool in the lining of those shoes, Vegan Kyle? I don't know. Is that what you mean? I'm assuming that's kind of what you're talking about. A lot of these, things you'll see like in jackets, or, like I used to have a lot of wool sweaters and stuff like that, or like gloves, or jackets, or like I had business suits that were made from wool. And it's like, yeah, you just like, before I was vegan, I just had no idea that like it would be just an incredibly, cruel industry. Like it's just kind of shocking when you first find out about it. Like I was definitely surprised by it. I had no idea that it was this, like, the animals are getting beaten and this rough kind of treatment. It's terrible. Vegan Kyle says he has to use wool, skin and wool. Yeah, okay. That's sad. This next story, sorry for the picture of the carcasses here. This is a crazy story. I definitely recommend everybody go and read this story. This is on Farmers Weekly site, which is basically like an industry news site. And they are basically talking about how abattoirs are short-staffed, and they are already projecting that there will be shortages of meat for Christmas sales because they just can't find enough people to work in the abattoirs. This is UK numbers that they're talking about. The whole story is geared toward UK producers and abattoirs, but they're basically saying that they normally have like a 0 to 5% vacancy for open positions. And that's what they saw in the 2017, but now they are between 10 to 15%. So they're basically saying that, yeah, of the 75,000 jobs in the meat processing industry, 10 to 15% of them are now unfilled. That's a lot of people that they're looking for, and they're basically saying that they have to increase the overtime that they're going to pay for the people that are still working there. To try and meet the demand. So it's like, it's really crazy because you figure, that's already an incredibly stressful and horrific job to be doing. And now they're going to make people work overtime. You'll probably see more accidents, more people cutting off their fingers and doing all sorts of crazy stuff that does happen in these industries, and getting even more probably, PTSD and all this kind of stuff that affects those people. It's a terrible thing. And then there were some very, very interesting things here in this article. They talked about how, a lot of the workforce in the UK abattoirs are coming from other EU countries. So they're saying that, they've got 69% of their workforce from other EU countries. And some of this exodus is being blamed on the declining value of the pound. So they're saying that a EU worker isn't going to be as keen to go and work this job in Britain, because what they're doing it for is so that they can send money home. And I can personally vouch for this. Like, I know many people from here in Hungary where they will go and work really demeaning or really dangerous or really kind of crap jobs, like in the UK, because comparatively it's still more pay than they would get here for doing kind of the same said job. And they'll be kind of like putting money aside or saving it or sending it home to their family here. It's really kind of like an abusive system that exploits people from poor neighboring countries. And it's just very interesting to me that they speak so openly about about it in this article, like, which is like a journal kind of like news site or whatever, an industry news site, I should say. And then one thing that I thought was very interesting too is that they talk about this as they try to kind of put in a little bit of an editorial spin on kind of like, oh, this is why they are having kind of these shortages of workers. But then at the very end, they basically acknowledge, they say, abattoirs have put in facilities and not got the staff to use them. It does not seem to be that the salary is the issue. People simply do not want to do this work. So it's counter to what they just said 2 paragraphs above. And I thought this was very interesting, that, yeah, people don't want to do the work. And there have been stories, in the past few months that I've seen where, slaughterhouses have had to shut their doors because they were trying to hire, say, like 100 people, and they got almost no applicants, and they literally had to close the doors and shut it down. So I think, again, just more and more people become aware of the horrors of these industries, the less likely they'll want to be working in them, and the less demand that we put there, the better. So, kudos to all the activists who are doing the wonderful vigils, the pig saves, all these kinds of things, I think really do matter. And kudos to all of you guys, like sharing stuff online, getting people the information, and using social media. I think very much the opposite of that Vox article that we talked about at the beginning. I think these forms of activism are working, and we need to increase our efforts on them, not decrease, and not let up on these companies, and keep pressuring them. Leon says apparently getting PTSD is no longer desirable. Yeah, go figure, right? Sticking with the UK, for the UK viewers, I'm sure everybody knows who David Attenborough is. Actually, probably most people watching this will probably know who that is. But in case you don't, he's kind of like a very famous narrator of various documentaries about wildlife and nature shows and all this kind of stuff. And he's been doing it for a long, long time. And I thought this article is an opinion piece by this guy, George Monbiot. I don't know if I pronounced his name right, but he did a wonderful job basically laying it out, just like the title says, that David Attenborough has betrayed the living world he loves. And he talks about how Attenborough has downplayed the effects of climate change and the kind of state of the environment, the state of the world, doesn't want to be a scaremonger. He basically, lays it out that, yeah, the BBC has commercial interests that they're trying to protect. They don't want to, ruffle too many feathers. He really lays into the guy, and with, great points and good examples. And, just really serious stuff. And I know probably some people, probably are big fans of the guy, of Attenborough. And, if you were watching all these kind of nature documentaries from back in the day, you can't help but his voice, and you kind of think the guy's a nice guy, but he's not. Vegan Cow says Planet Earth. That's right. There was the Planet Earth. There's a bunch of stuff that people would probably know. You would recognize his voice if you heard it right away. He's got a very distinctive voice. Yeah, I think this part was really great too in the article. He says, if Attenborough's environmentalism has a coherent theme, it is shifting the blame from powerful forces onto either society in general or the poor and weak. Sometimes it becomes pretty dark. In 2013, he told the Telegraph, "What are all these famines in Ethiopia? What are they about? They're about too many people for too little land. We say, get the United Nations to send them bags of flour. That's barmy." And then, the writer says there had not been a famine in Ethiopia for 28 years, and the last one was caused not by an absolute food shortage, but by civil war and government policies. His suggestion that food relief is counterproductive suggests he has read nothing on the subject since Thomas Malthus's essay in 1798. But cruel and ignorant as these comments were, they were more or less cost-free. By contrast, you do not remain a national treasure by upsetting powerful vested interests. And yeah, really great article. Definitely check this out. I really highly encourage everybody to check this out, especially if you kind of are a fan of David Attenborough. You might not be after you read this. Sticking with the UK friends watching, I've talked before about the badger calls and how they are completely unproductive and unuseful. And this is just another, bunch of scientists who are banding together to say that, yes, the government is lying and they have no, it says insupportable claims that the badger call policy is working. And, yeah, they're basically just, calling them out on it and saying that it hasn't reduced the incidence of tuberculosis in cattle and that the calculations are being fudged and they're outright lying. So yeah, don't trust your politicians. I would much rather trust a scientist or a veterinarian familiar with this matter. So yeah, check out this article too. Leon says Africa isn't really that densely populated; it just has a shortage of arable land. Well, yeah, but as the article pointed out, in this particular case, that wasn't even the cause of the problem. It's more political. And if you look at kind of like the Western countries. And their exploitive kind of use of, African lands, Asian lands, etc. It's just, it's a crazy, thing. Like we definitely cause more problems in the third world areas than we're willing to admit, because it's a really ugly truth. And if nothing else, just, by growing all the grains and soy and corn and everything else that we use to feed our animals in these poor areas of the world, and then basically making them export it so we can feed our cattle and stuff in Europe and the US. I mean, that's really what also causes a lot of the poverty and hunger in these third world areas. Now we are going to be switching to a theme around dogs. I've got a bunch of articles to talk about dogs specifically. This first one is about Florida. They recently voted to ban a greyhound racing, I guess, whatever, installation that was going to get built. And yeah, 69% of Floridians voted to pass this amendment, which bans greyhound racing in Florida by 2020. So I think that is great. It says that the passage effectively shuts down the sport at 11 dog tracks across Florida, more tracks than the rest of the country combined. So that is fantastic. I think it's great. An incredibly cruel industry. A lot of people don't know about this either. It's kind of the same thing that I think most people thought, about, like, it's like horse racing or whatever. It's like, oh, the horses like running. Oh, the dogs, they like running. What they don't realize is that, yeah, they're beaten to run, they're starved to run, and when they don't win, they get killed. A lot of these dogs are put down, a lot of the horses are put down, a lot of them get injured, a lot of them are sick. It's a really ugly thing, and a lot of greyhounds get put down to support this industry. It's the same thing with horses, so I think this was a great bit of news. Next, this one kind of speaks to the cognitive dissonance that I've mentioned. And, I've recently done a video on cognitive dissonance, so I don't know if anybody hasn't seen that one. Definitely check that out as well. But the people that I saw sharing this, article on Twitter, most of the comments that I saw were actually from people who were non-vegans, and they were rightfully incredibly upset by this lady. They found like 160 some odd dogs living on her property, and she had 44 dead dogs found in freezers in her home. And they obviously, you know, like took away the dogs from her. She's going to face some, you know, charges, and, you know, they're charging her with cruel, inhumane keeping of these animals and all this kind of stuff. And people are rightfully incredibly upset with this lady and blah, blah, blah. But several, you know, vegan people had kind of posted kind of just trying to highlight some of the hypocrisy that people have with regards to this kind of thing, or the cognitive dissonance. And they said, like, look, if, you know, she had 44, you know, dead turkeys or chickens or, you know, some other kind of food animals in freezers, you would just say, oh, she's a prepper. You know, she likes having a lot of food on hand. Like, you wouldn't even think twice about it. And I thought that was kind of, you know, telling with some of the conversations that started in comments back and forth on Twitter that I read. It just really, really goes to show you a lot of people, they don't see the similarities between like dogs and pigs and, you know, other animals that are just really, really smart and intelligent, and that we treat them so horribly, like, you know, in farms and stuff. And it's really just a question of like cultural and, you know, societal conditioning that makes the difference. This is a sad story. I will have to caveat this because I'm not 100% sure that all the images and videos that are referenced in this story are legit. I've seen some comments on Twitter suggesting that some of the videos and pictures that got posted are not recent, and that people are just kind of posting them as related to this story. But what we do know is that about 5 days ago, there was a law that went into effect in Hangzhou, I don't know if I pronounced that right, in China, where they had these like incredibly barbaric sanctions put in place against various dog owners. They barred people from owning like 20 some odd different breeds of dog, and also they put in like place really draconian measures to remove dogs from people if they were found in violation of any of the rules, like if they had the banned breed in question, or also if they were walking the dog out of the allowable hours. They basically made it so people can't walk their dog outside of, like, I think it's like 7 a.m. You have to be like back in the house, or after, I think it was 10 p.m. So it's like you could walk your dog from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., but no other time. And if you're outside of the dog, they could like confiscate your dog or even kill it. And there's all these like pictures and videos of like police like drowning dogs, beating them to death, shooting them. It's like crazy stuff. And you know, of course, people were like super upset about this and calling it barbaric and all this kind of stuff. But again, if you saw this with a pig, you know, and then people eat it, it's like they're just not making the connection. So it's really frustrating. And there was a lot of this kind of back and forth on Twitter about these kind of articles. This one is kind of like a feel-good story in a way, although it is pretty sad. There is a mayor in Massachusetts who took his sick dog. I guess he found that the dog had terminal cancer or some kind of illness, and wasn't going to be alive for very long. And he like canceled his vacation that he had planned, and instead went on a cross-country drive with the dog and took the dog back to see the dog's birthplace. So I guess like he had gotten the dog mailed to him, or like air shipped or whatever from this place in Canada. Excuse me. And then he drove back with the dog to that place so the dog could kind of like see where he was born. And he was like really attached to this dog. And they went and took pictures in all these kind of wonderful places that they visited. And then he posted them to his social media. This was the dog as a puppy, super cute. And then he took him, you know, all over the world, all over the U.S. and like the Grand Canyon and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, just talks about how, like, you know, he's so attached to this dog and all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of like this feel-good story, and it really goes to show you kind of how attached people get to their pets. But, you know, then again, going back to what I just said before, like, can people find the same kind of compassion for a pig or some other animal? And I hope they do, because pets really are like members of the family, and this would be something that you would absolutely do this for somebody that or whatever. Like, you would want them to kind of like have some good experiences before they pass on. You would absolutely want to limit their suffering, all this kind of stuff. And even here, they talk about how he got the dog kind of like shipped to him from so far away by airline or whatever, by airplane. And here it is. He said he'd never met the breeder because they had sent Mura to him by plane. That was the name of the dog. So you had this little puppy who was 8 weeks old, got put on a plane and sent across the country, actually to another country, from Canada to the U.S. And I'm sure, like, just from reading this, like, he probably didn't even think of that as being cool. But like, people really need to realize that, like, even pets get treated badly. Like, this is like, we're talking about a little baby gets put in a cage and then put into probably a dark, scary, probably cold, belly of a plane, and flown, and incredible noise and pressure and all this kind of stuff. It's like, it's really kind of crazy. And then, people don't even see that as being kind of like wrong. People getting these designer breeds and special, kind of dogs, and it's just really crazy. So just wanted to share that. And then the last kind of dog related story I have is just a very sad state of affairs here. I don't know if anybody has been following, but there's been a lot of protests against Canada Goose. They have jackets that have down, which is an incredibly cruel practice where they rip off feathers from live birds. And then they also use fur from coyotes for trim around the hoodies and stuff like that of their jackets. And this article talks about how high pelt prices have resulted in the largest catch of coyotes, like, so far on record in Saskatchewan. So they're basically saying this past season, going into 2018, was the highest number that they've recorded. So it's almost 40,000 animals that they skinned and took their fur. And the interesting thing about this article is that they're really just talking about all these animals as just products. Like there's just no concern at all whatsoever for these poor animals. And these are literally the same thing as dogs. It's just like a wild dog. I mean, you look at them, they're exactly like a dog. If people saw the kind of conditions that these animals had to endure before they get killed, many times they're trapped for sometimes days at a time, no food, no water, broken leg, incredible suffering. Sometimes their babies are left unattended because the mama coyote will get trapped. They'll die of starvation. I mean, there's just so much incredible cruelty in fur, especially with like coyotes, like the way they're treated, and they are literally dogs. And like, if people saw it, I'm convinced that they would do something about it and not buy that product. But yeah, it's just, even this, whoever wrote this article, like, they just wrote it as like, oh yeah, it's great for these hunters and people trapping these animals, and they're literally just talking about them as products. And it's just very sad. It's like a commodity, like oh, the price of oil went up this week, and it's like, it was a good year, or whatever, for like, the people getting these coyotes. So just terrible. They're really sad. Dogs aren't even that intelligent, says Leon. Yeah, I mean, I guess compared to like pigs, right? People say pigs are more intelligent. They do better, even on certain like video game simulations and stuff, even than certain primates. So yeah, I mean, pigs are like really smart in comparison. But I mean, I think dogs, they do have kind of something going for them. They have learned, I guess, kind of like a lot of cues and I don't know, I guess like behavioral kind of things that distinguish them from a lot of other animals. They kind of have been living with us for so long that they definitely have kind of something. They have an edge over a lot of other animals, that they know how to react around people, I think. Like, so yeah, I mean, they might not be that intelligent compared to some of the other animals, but yeah, they do have some little special things that they're certainly better at than other animals, I think. case as mine is. Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of dogs are really smart, but I think, you know, some of it is, again, that this special adaptation from being around people for so long. Dogs are more willing to listen and do what you want. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for teaching them little basic things and commands and stuff, you can certainly train them really well. All right. Next, I wanted to kind of give another shout out to Jessica Scott Reed. I've given a shout out to her before. I follow her on Twitter. She has great articles and opinion pieces that she contributes to various publications online and I guess print as well. She's in Canada. She's talking about some laws that are looking to get changed in, I don't remember, I think is it Montreal? I don't even remember. But basically, she's talking about the Ontario Farm Building Code being like Manitoba, yeah. So I guess like the building code in Ontario is very, very loose, and you're not required to have like fire detection and suppression systems for barns. So things that are considered low human occupancy, those kind of buildings don't have the same legal requirements for fire protection as like a house. And she talks about the toll that this has on farmed animals. And yeah, they're saying that in 2016, media reports account for at least 30,000 pigs, cows, horses, sheep, goats, ducks, and chickens killed in barn fires across the country, mostly in Ontario. And she makes the case that it's because Ontario had the most lax laws when it came to these building codes, and that they are now talking about changing the codes in Manitoba to suit to basically, you know, fit that same kind of loose, you know, requirement. And it's basically a cop out to industry so that they can build cheaper barns. And yeah, it's really, really sad. And, you know, she's making the case that like this is not okay and that we should have more protection for farmed animals because it's incredibly cruel that they are allowed to suffer, you know, horrific deaths like by fire, you know, from these barn fires that could easily be prevented if they had proper building codes, you know, like more strict requirements like in the other areas of the country. So basically, she's saying, yeah, it's a step in the wrong direction if they ease those requirements in Manitoba. This one is a little bit of a health tidbit. This was a article that somebody linked in Twitter. It was actually put up by a doctor. They are a plant-based doctor. I can't remember the guy's name right now. Sorry about that. I would give a shout out if I remember. But anyway, this was a very well put together study. It had a control group. It was randomized, controlled, you know, like regular, proper study. And here you can see that randomized, controlled, parallel design intervention study. Participants were either assigned to a 3-week low carbohydrate, high fat diet, or a control group continuing what they were eating. Both groups had ad libitum, which means they could eat as much as they wanted. There was no restrictions. They took 30 healthy, normal weight participants, and what they found was that the low carb, high fat group, so basically the you know, the test group, so not the control group, they had very significant increase in their LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, so to speak, and it was significant and very surprising, I guess. So what they found was that this little graph here shows what we're talking about. You took the young and healthy people, you had half doing the continuation of their regular diet, you had no change in their LDL cholesterol, but the people that you put on the low carbohydrate, high fat diet, after just 3 weeks, they had a 44% increase in their LDL-C levels. And they also pointed out, which is very huge, I mean, that is insane, it's almost half. They also said that the individual increase in the LDL from baseline varied between 5 and 107%. So what this means is, again, that you had some people that, you know, they only increased a little bit, like 5%, but some people, it went over 100% increase. So it's like you double your LDL in 3 weeks of being on a low carbohydrate, high fat diet. So I thought this was like really crazy. Definitely, you know, bookmark this for yourselves the next time somebody wants to tell you about how great their, you know, ketogenic or whatever, carnivore diet or whatever, some stupid thing that they're doing is, send them this article. Next, this was a article written by Dr. Greger of nutritionfacts.org. Great read. Talks about taxing meat and animal products, things with high saturated fat content, and he likens it to the effort that was done about taxing cigarettes. And he also, what I really liked about this article, he also talks about how you had people who say, oh, well, if you're taxing saturated fat, you're going to disproportionately affect poor people, and it's not fair to them because that's the kind of foods that they can afford, and blah blah blah. And he basically says, like, look, same thing happened with cigarettes. Where was the there was a great part where oh yeah, here it is. So he said, wouldn't such a tax disproportionately affect the poor, though? Yes, it would benefit them the most, just like cigarette taxes. The classic tobacco industry argument is that the cigarette taxes are unfair and regressive and burdening the poor the most. The public health community's response, cancer is unfair and cancer is regressive, disproportionately burdening the poor, such that a cigarette tax could result in the greatest health gains for the least well-off. So really great stuff. I love Dr. Greger. Check this out. He talks a lot also about how if they incentivize people to buy fruits and veggies, that you could see even better, you know, gains. And, you know, he talks about some theoretical, you know, simulators where people were buying more fruit if there was a 25% discount on the fruit and the veggies. But he says, okay, but does it work out in the real world? And he says, yes. In fact, South Africa's largest health insurance company started offering up to 25% cash back on a healthy food purchase to hundreds of thousands of households, up to $500 a month, US dollars a month. And then he says, why would the insurance company do that? Why give money away? Because it works. The health food cash back program was associated with an increase in the consumption of fruits, veggies, and whole grains, as well as a decrease in foods high in added sugar, salt, and fat, including processed meats and fast food. And, you know, insurance companies are, you can call them whatever you want. You can think of them as evil corporations and whatever, but they know math, they know statistics, they know what people pay, and they know what they pay out. And it's a simple math equation for them. They just simply look at it as like, we can save people getting sick, we can save money that we have to pay for their treatment. If they see that as a benefit, they're going to do it. So I think this is a really cool article. Definitely recommend everybody check this one out. And this is a Guardian article about the same topic. There was a recent kind of proposal that was, I guess, like discussed or put forth in various articles online, where they are saying that we should tax red meat and processed meats and treat it similarly to how sugar, alcohol, and tobacco are taxed as like sin tax, you know, has been put in place in various countries, and that has reduced, you know, and curbed people's purchase of those products. And they're basically saying that if they did this in the wealthy nations where, you know, you would have to tax people the most because they obviously, you know, make more money than the poor places. They're basically saying that you'd be able to save 220,000 deaths a year and also raise $170 billion. I think that's a global figure, though. But yeah, so it's just this really, really crazy, you know, amount, and it's really cool. Like I'm not in favor really of like taxes in general, but I think like, you know, I'm more in the favor of like the, you know, give incentives to people. So like definitely like giving subsidies to fresh fruits and veggies and just taking it away from the animal product, animal agriculture industry. I think that's kind of the way to go. But the fact that people are talking about this, I think, is a very positive thing. And when people see the percentage of the money that gets spent on, you know, dealing with sick people and treating people with diseases that are totally preventable, yeah, I just think it's like, you know, it's really important to see this kind of stuff. So yeah, And they talk about the environmental impact here as well. They say scientists reported that huge reductions in meat eating are essential to avoid dangerous climate change, including a 90% drop in beef consumption in Western nations. So we've talked about this before. Okay, so yeah, definitely read through this article. Really great figures, very interesting stuff. Check it out. Next one is kind of the typical meat eater, you know, omnivore kind of response to the previous suggestion. And this guy just says, no, you should just tax vegans. Don't tax meat. And it's just kind of a, you know, typical snarky kind of like reply. So he says, I'd like to flip this on its head and say that we should tax vegans. I'll tell you why, because this is an absolute nonsense. And he's saying, like, look, people don't live forever. Like, you know, we're paying too much as it is for NHS. Like, you know, if people just die sooner, we'll have, you know, we'll save a bunch of money because we don't have to pay for them. And also those poor people. And it's like, this is the kind of drivel that gets, you know, pushed in the mainstream media. It's just absolutely crazy. So shout out to Plant-Based News for highlighting this nonsense. I thought that was pretty cool. Going back to something we did at the beginning of the stream, talked a little bit about some of the abuse that you know, vegan activists suffer at the hands of hunters or, you know, farmers or what have you. But this was a case where there was a turkey farm that ran an advert encouraging families to come down, pick out a turkey, and then help raise and feed it for the Christmas holiday. And you would get to somehow bond with this turkey, and then you just leave out the messy part to them, which is the kill it and, you know, clean it part, and then you just get the nice carcass so that you can cook it up for your family. But anyway, this said farm, they had a Twitter campaign and other social media where they were pushing this kind of opportunity for people, and apparently they got some nasty, you know, graffiti spray painted on their facility. So it just said "Murder, Go Vegan," and they, you know, said that they got some death threats and stuff and abuse, and they spray painted some dead animals that were hanging on the outside of their facility here. I think these were pheasants, yeah, and you know, obviously, I guess, like, contaminating them so you wouldn't be able to eat those anymore. And they filed a police report and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, it's just like, I don't condone this kind of thing at all. So, you know, if anybody's watching, like, I'm certainly not giving the impression that, you know, this is effective vegan activism. But what I am going to say is that, you know, it pales in comparison to, like, the threat that I mentioned with the, you know, with the dead animal part, like, left on somebody's windshield directly. I mean, this to me is not the same thing as, you know, directly threatening somebody, you know, just spray painting. It is vandalism. I don't approve of it. I don't like it. I don't think it's painting veganism in a good light, but I certainly think it's still a far cry from the death threat kind of level that they're trying to make it out to be. The other thing is that I'm not at all convinced that these are always actual vegans who do this. Sometimes I think that people can maybe fake this stuff. I don't know that. It's just the kind of feeling I have. I personally don't know any vegans that would do this. But I guess, you know, it's certainly possible that it is a legit vandalism by a vegan. I don't know that, though. But anyway, I just thought I'd share that, too. And we're getting near the end, I think, finally, and that's kind of a good thing because it's midnight here. This one is a pea-based vegan gelatin that got developed. So Piers is the largest pea protein producer in North America, and they are now using one of the byproducts of the pea protein, I guess, is this, yeah, they're using pea starch, a derivative of the core product, and they're making a gelatin type material that can be used to make, like, these gummy bear type things or many of the other things that you know, are typically made with gelatin. So if anybody is watching and you're not aware, gelatin is made from the bones and cartilage and skin animal carcasses. And it's really kind of gross, actually, when you find that out, because I didn't know that for the longest time either. But anyway, in a lot of products, it's there for like a specific texture or some kind of like, basically like filler kind of component. And it's in like the most unlikely of things, like gummy bears or other, candies and things like that, like snacks and treats and stuff. So a lot of times, like, kids are eating this stuff, and it's really gross if you think about it. And kids, unfortunately, like, I know from my own experience, like, they see these colorful, fruity-looking, little treats, and they want to eat these things. The figures are made to be these cute little, bears or some similar kind of thing, and it's just kind of like very difficult sometimes to explain to your kid like why they can't have them. And it's nice to know that there are vegan options. And recently here in Hungary, in some of the larger supermarkets, they've actually gotten vegan gummy bears and gummy worms and what have you. And it's been really cool to be able to just, like, if my kid's like, oh, I want to get a gummy bear, then I can just be like, well, here's the vegan one. And they know the difference. And it's great to be able to explain it to them, like, why we don't eat the other ones, and to be able to give them a alternative. So I think that's really cool. Yeah, Leon says there are already vegan gelatin replacers used in some gummy bears. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I'm really thrilled. And the more options, the better. And hopefully in other products, they'll get replaced as well too. This is a article that I thought was pretty interesting. This was the Hollywood Reporter. They were talking about how a bunch of celebrities and rich, famous people are looking for vegan home design. Things like couches and furniture and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, here it is. They're basically just talking about how homeowners have a keen interest in animal welfare, and they are moving away from leather interiors. They are going to things made from mushrooms. Although I don't know how this comes into vegan. They're saying jellyfish or banana silk. But anyway, they're basically just talking about the basis from No Doubt. I guess wanted to get a, faux leather couch or whatever, and they want vegan options, and a bunch of other people, and they're looking for these other kind of exotic materials to replicate the kind of like feel and texture of leather or other things like that. So great article. Great to see that more and more people are interested in not just a cruelty-free diet, but as much as possible a cruelty-free lifestyle that incorporates, or includes, I should say, home design and, things like carpets or stuff like that. Again, we just talked about wool, same thing. So, yeah, it's really great. And I think this might be the last. Oh, no, I got a couple more, sorry. This is a company that is making basically what feels and looks kind of like a leather rug, but they are not using, obviously, cow hide. They are making it from palm, I guess, leaves. And they make this material. It comes out in strips. They actually cut them and then glue them together and attach them to some kind of like cloth material. And you can roll this out and make huge like carpet sections out of this. And apparently it's sort of like a leather carpet or rug. You can color it and dye it like you can see in the pictures here. And they basically make them in the Dominican Republic. And they will ship, I think, worldwide, actually, if I remember right. So anyway, they're basically just talking about how, they're getting a boom because many people nowadays are interested in this, vegan kind of option, and they're talking about the environmental impact and blah, blah, blah. So just another option and another great thing to see that, they are not made from cows, but people like them and they will use them in place of that. So I think that's great. This is a cool article about a guy that I don't know of, but for anybody watching from South America, you probably maybe know this guy. He's an Argentinian chef, and apparently the guy is known for his meat dishes. And yeah, it says nice from a Dutch designer too. Oh, cool. Maybe you recognize the name too. Nice. Annie says you should beat my dog, Leon. Oh man, you guys are funny. So anyway, so this guy is kind of known for being a big, meat dish preparing chef in Argentina, and they have a, I guess like cultural heritage of, heavy meat dishes and whatever. And this guy, Francis Malman, has reportedly said that he views the future as being vegan, and he said that here it is, the quote: "I think that in 30 more years we won't be eating any more animals." Malman responded, an answer that could have easily shocked listeners given his history of barbecuing animal meat in the Patagonian wilderness. He continued, "My aim is to make main dishes for vegans, which will be like a steak. I want them to feel that they sit down for lunch or dinner and they feel that they eat something as substantial as a steak." And then he says, yeah, change is life. We have to be able to change. And, if you have somebody like this seeing this kind of truth, like, this is very encouraging to me. This guy is obviously, I don't know his age, but I mean, just looking at his picture, like, he's clearly like an older guy. He's probably lived his whole life, eating meat, loving to eat meat, all this kind of stuff. And he even sees it. And he's saying 30 years, he's saying 30 years that we won't even be eating animals. I hope to God that he's right. Like, I mean, this is this is what we want. So I think, this is a kind of a good positive sign, and hopefully a sign of more things to come. So, yeah. Oh, I think vegan, Kyle, you're responding to the vegan leather story. Yeah, it's kind of annoying. They have a story about how they're also looking to make leather from the stomachs of the cows. Yeah, this is really gross as well. And they had a related story. I didn't read that one. But yeah, I guess people are just trying to, use every bit of the animal, as they always try to, I don't know, justify all these horrible things. But yeah, it's pretty gross. I think that's kind of what you were referring to. Okay, so yeah, moving on to the last one here. This was a story about the Game Changers movie by James Cameron. If anybody doesn't know, that movie is basically about like various athletes that are vegan and really kind of changing the kind of stereotypical image of like the vegans as being skinny, unathletic, whatever, like non-energetic people. And he's basically saying that the vegan diet, whole food, plant-based diet is going to put Viagra out of business because people are going to have better health, better libido, sex life, everything as a result of it. So I just think again, it's great to see mainstream people with huge followings, huge fan bases promoting this information to people, and I think it's working. It's like you just kind of look around. Like 2018 has been a huge year for veganism, I think, and it's like there's more and more interest and more people. I mean, the guy is like one of the most successful directors, I think, probably of all time. If you look at like the Titanic and Avatar and all this kind of stuff, like he's done so many huge movies. Like kind of I just can't, like, I can't believe that, like, if you have somebody this kind of like well known pushing this kind of message and putting together these kind of movies, that it won't have a big effect. I'm absolutely certain it will. And there's more and more people doing articles about this and just talking about it. So I think it's great. Yeah, since it's almost winter and it still hasn't been released, so I haven't seen it either, and I don't know if is it even possible to see it anywhere. Like I've just seen like little clips of it here and there. I think on like plant-based news and stuff like that. If anybody knows, let me know or send me a link. I'd love to see it. And I actually still need to see like Dominion. I haven't watched it yet, although I do intend to see it. But that's another one that I really want to see. Yeah, so Okay, guys, so I think that's it. Yeah, that was the last one. That was the last story I had. I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything else that you want to quickly mention, but I'm going to head off to bed pretty soon. It's getting pretty late here. Hope you guys enjoyed it. It was kind of a long one. I had been really busy and I had a bunch saved up, so some of the articles weren't that current, but I think hopefully it was a nice flow for you guys. Okay, so it's supposed to be in Netflix in the fall, so it shouldn't be long. Well, okay, hopefully. Cool, thanks, Leon. Okay, guys. The first showings were over a year ago already. Yeah, that's kind of a bummer that it's taking so long to get out there, but as long as it gets out there, you know, I'm a big believer in kind of like you shed light on things, and like once things are like out there, you know, the truth doesn't go away. Like, you know, there's a lot of vested interest, you know, trying to, now let me stop sharing this so you guys can see me at least when I say goodbye here. You know, there's a lot of interest, obviously, from the animal agriculture industry and a whole bunch of other people that are vested in these industries to try and maintain the status quo and maintain their use and exploitation of animals for financial gain. But I think, you know, the more and more people see the reality, you know, we're going to see more and more things like we talked about, the abattoir workers, you know, being in a shortage. Like, people just don't want to do the work anymore. People don't want to be, you know, getting paid for killing, you know, animals. Like, yeah, I just think like things are changing. People are going to see that you don't need to do it. Once you realize you don't need to do it, then I think it's just a really easy ethical choice to make, because you realize that you're just doing it for convenience or taste, and it's really changing, you know, the situation for people. So yeah, it's really cool. Oh, thanks, guys. Cool. I'm happy you guys were all on. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks. Hopefully see you guys soon. If I don't do a Thanksgiving one, then for anybody celebrating Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving. Check out my Thanksgiving video from last year. I'll try to put in a link to that one, to this video, just in case anybody hasn't seen that one. And yeah, happy Thanksgiving. Try out some of the recipes and let me know how they turn out for you. And I hopefully will do another one of these sometime soon. Cool. Good night, everybody.